What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again once again, and today we are not talking about the raid, at least not the raid proper. For one, I haven't finished it. Between getting sick and our 6th, playing Elden Ring until 8 a.m., and then passing out for the entire day, the night before he knew he was I'm not mad. And of course server shenanigans that left Anteater and Guitar as the real final boss of the raid. So even though I know a lot about the raid, I don't think it's quite the right time to talk about the raid. What I will say, however, is the raid looks cool. What I played was extremely fun. The launch of the raid, however, was unacceptable. Bungie makes this huge deal about this being content for the top 1% of Destiny players, and I'm not going to knock that. It puts Destiny at the top of the directory on Twitch, it gets people excited about the event. However, an event whose winners could very well be decided based on Bungie's server performance at any given moment, and not how the players are playing, is, in my opinion, not a true contest. Bungie goes out of their way to ensure that the day one raid race is competitive by limiting what players can take into the raid, by limiting how much power players can grind before the raid. But they can't also ensure that their own servers are stable for the raid. This just seems like a gross oversight. And it's not like Bungie is new to this. We're 7 years into Destiny. But I digress, credit where credit is due. When the raid works, it looks cool. While I'm not a fan of the weapons and armor, I do adore the way the raid has played so far and the lore around it. With that out of the way, once the raid was defeated, a new activity became available, much like with the Dreaming City after the last Wish raid was defeated. For starters, you can progress your exotic glaive quest. You can't finish it if you didn't farm out the 2 red box weapons from Wellspring that you need. That, to be fair, Bungie will be increasing the drop rates on sometime next week. But hey, you can play Preservation. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. Preservation does something that Bungie has needed to do for years. And something that, to be fair, Bungie did start doing in Destiny 1, but then stopped. And that is teach the raid mechanics to the player via playing the game. If I might digress again for a moment, Final Fantasy XIV quite possibly has the most informed player base when it comes to playing their endgame content. And I'm not the only one who thinks this.
Then this and a few other things, I think really does mean that the average FF14 player is better at this content than I would say sometimes the average player of, well, maybe WoW or maybe other MMOs. And there's quite a lot to unpack with that. I mean, there's what I've already said about how I think the overall combat design is more geared towards teaching people to be better players, but there's another thing, and that is the dungeons and trials are part of the story progression. Every person who went from level 80 to level 90 cleared those 3 trials. And that means that they will have benefited from all of the design boons that I just mentioned.
Traditionally, Destiny doesn't have anything really like that. However, with the Preservation mission, we do, in my opinion, see Bungie taking steps to correct this error. Now, while I do think that the Preservation mission doesn't take it far enough, what it does do is introduce the player to some of the raid mechanics, the opening of the door and such. It is, as the Destiny community likes to say and has said for the past 7 years, a step in the right direction. This is a great start. And I do think that Bungie has an opportunity with future expansions to experiment more with raid mechanics in the early to mid-game content, things that players are going to play anyways, so why not train players how to play the endgame in the early game? And it's not like players don't need it, because, let's face it, we've all been there. The LFG where nobody knows what they're doing, or clearly 2 to 3 people are there to be carry, even though they don't say so, and maybe they're quiet when people are asking, hey, does everybody know how the raid mechanics work? And instead of just admitting that they don't know how the raid mechanics work because they're afraid they'll get kicked, instead of have the raid mechanics explained to them, they just stay quiet and waste everybody's time. And controversial opinion, sorry, not sorry, but if you are asking to be controversial opinion, sorry, not sorry, but if you are asking to be part of somebody else's raid team after guides have been released, you have no excuse not to know the encounters. I do not care if you want to play the raid blind and not be spoiled. Don't be selfish. If you want to play a blind raid through an LFG, make your own post and recruit a group to play blind. If you are joining someone else's group via LFG, you better have watched that Datto or Astacross or Evade guide. I don't give a shit what you want. If you are wasting other people's time because you can't be bothered to learn the mechanics, fuck right off with that. Now, again, like I said, if you're making your own LFG with blackjack and hookers, you can do whatever you want. Don't piggyback on someone else's, however, expecting a carry, unless it's something like a Sherpa or a carry, and they've said it's a Sherpa and a carry, and all the acceptable exceptions. Don't just go into a randos group and expect to get carried. Like, that's just messed up. However, with all of that said, Bungie could also alleviate a lot of these issues if people at least have somewhat of an understanding of the mechanics going into the raid, understanding that they learned through playing the game. So I'm glad to see Bungie experiment with that here, because a better informed community when it comes to playing the endgame, even if not everybody's up for playing the endgame, still has you with more people who can play the endgame than not. Teaching people through the game, in my opinion, is a far better way to get more people into the endgame, but I digress. As for preservation itself, I enjoyed it. I'm not going to get into spoilers too much here, but it looks like one of those missions you'll be able to play weekly and unlock more of it. There seems to be 12 pieces of lore, I've only found 6, and what I found is fucking awesome. There's also audio logs that you can access throughout the play space, and these audio logs unlock lore cards that have different lore, so reading through it and listening to all this is really, really cool. I really like the story about the disciple and the witness. It's all really good stuff. Is it true? Well, that really is the million-dollar question when it comes to any Destiny lore at all, ever, in light of the Book of Sorrows being a lie, in light of Truth to Power being a lie, in light of the Book of the Unveiling having quite a few things that don't add up, in light of the Martian missives having lies attached to them. However, I'm gonna say that these are true. Bold statement, I know, but they're true in that truth is a funny thing, perspective, grain of salt sort of way. These are written from the POV of the disciple, and the disciple seems way too much of a witness worshiper to outright lie about his deeds and the witness's deeds. That would almost come off as sacrilegious given the way that this character has been explained to us. He's a fanatic, just like Oryx. And here's where the grain of salt comes into play. Oryx believed everything that he wrote in the Book of Sorrows. I'm almost 100% certain. But it wasn't the truth. Witch Queen has shown us what really happened. However, it was the truth as Oryx understood it. And I think that these lore cards and these audio logs are the truth as the disciple understood it. So yeah, there is that, and we'll talk more about that in a proper lore video. All in all, lore's great, mission's fun, great aesthetic. Jeez, I love the pyramid ship city thing. So cool. And yeah, I really hope Bungie does lean more into teaching players how to play the endgame with missions like this in the future. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Remember to like, but only if you did. Subscribe for more. Feel free to donate to my Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous. It really, really does help the channel out. But above all else, stay frosty.